Hello and welcome back to Fireside and Fairy Tale. It's lovely to see you, and I would like to just spend a minute to thank everyone who has subscribed to Fireside and Fairy Tale. It's lovely to have you on board. I hope that you're inspired. I hope there are things that you learn here, and I hope that you're not put off by all of my muddle through my knitting as I go, in that I'm not the world's best knitter by any stretch. I knit for enjoyment, for relaxation, and I'm a slow knitter, and it took actually many years to get to the point I have reached now. But it's been a long journey for me. It may be a very quick one for you. It may be a long one for you. If you can pick up and avoid mistakes, get some tips and hints from me as I share my knitting programs with you, then that's very much all to the good. So, following on from last webcast, where I was sharing the very beginning of my Sugar Plum Cardigan. Now, I'm just so creative. I will follow instructions, but I love the design, the challenge of designing my own garments, and that's perhaps why partly why I have been rather slower to produce, in that I've sort of felt my way. It's almost like been like a research program for me, and I would say that I came in on the colour side of knitting at a very interesting time in the history of knitting, in that I arrived back in the UK from having lived abroad in the 1980s, just as that wonderful designer, creative artist, Kaffe Fassett, had hit the scene in England. And his book, which had come out, was called Glorious Colour. And I couldn't wait to get hold of it. Glorious Knitting. Couldn't wait to get hold of it. When I arrived back, I remember flying back in the aeroplane, looking forward to obtaining his book. I'm just having a quick look to see when it was published. 1985. This edition came out in 1985, so perhaps not quite at the absolute start of his career, but this is where I met up with his designs. And I was very fortunate to be close enough to a talk that he gave, not a workshop, but a talk in Gloucestershire. And I was living in Bristol at the time, in England, and shot up the motorway and was completely inspired. And I spent many happy hours gloating over what to me was a complete revolution in knitting, and it was for, I think, for very many people. I think before then, knitting, I had been taught at school. My mother tried to knit me a little bit. I had done Easter egg cozies for my lovely grandfather. I was age 7. But knitting for me, going through my teens and on up, was something that I viewed as dull. The patterns were often in grey, double knitting, a rather boring blue. They were very much shaped, and so I find stylistically they simply weren't fitting in with what I was interested in, things like tent dresses and psychedelic colours. And though my mother did have a wonderful collection of metal knitting needles, and she did knit, I wasn't drawn at all until this amazing colour knitting. And I will show you a garment that has come from that. But I would like to point out that a couple of decades later, I found Alice Starmore and the Shetland knitting and the Fairisle. And of course, again, I'd known about Fairisle from when I was a child, living in Scotland at the time. So Fairisle wasn't a new concept to me, but the actual methods were new. And of course, I came in through Kaffe Fassett to Shetland knitting and to colour knitting, and found Jameson and Smith and Alice Starmore, and went on and knitted, learned how to knit in the round, and I think I produced, with an enormous struggle, two or three jumpers and a tammy, what we call a tammy. And then my life took over in other directions, very, very busy for another couple of decades. So, but what goes around comes around. Life tends to be cyclical, and I came back into knitting, and I had thought to myself, yes, I have to do another garment in colour knitting, but I'd come across the idea of Intarsia at that point, and so I thought I would design my own and make it. Well, that took 2 years, on and off. What did I start with? Well, I started with a sample, which I highly recommend, and certainly I wouldn't start at all any new garment without making a sample. And so I knitted this up, and it's called Nasturtium. And I thought, well, that's wow, I really like that. And it's got different colours in it, but it is actually colour knitting, and then I've added embroidered baubles. Now, I'm not very keen on embroidering knitting, though there are some amazing examples. There's a lovely Swedish lady who does amazing garments, and another Norwegian lady, but and I'm sure there are many more. But I sort of like to integrate knitting as I go along. And in another program on knitting, I will show you about actually knitting baubles rather than embroidering them in, or as the Japanese knitting Bible suggests, crocheting them in. I like to knit them in. Anyway, I digress. Here I was with my sample, feeling terribly pleased, and I collected and collected and collected everywhere I went, different balls of wool, according to Kaffe Fassett's idea of, well, you mix different weights, it's okay. And up to a point I agree with that, but you have to be careful. If you have really thin yarn and chunky yarn, they not so sure that works so well. So I gathered up an entire box over a couple of years of different colours for my, these are just 3, for my, what was to be my garment, my colour garment. And this is a, I call it Rowan, the English call it Rowan wool. I think this is yak. What's this? Berger, which is made in France, and I suppose it's double knitting looking at it. Parisienne, lovely. So then I also have the I also have the Jameson and Smith, one of their colours. But of course, an entire box of a vast amount of different colours. So I realised that the basic weight would be double knitting. A 2-ply jumper weight was actually my basic weight for it. And I started with the sleeve. Here we are. Started with our sleeve. Here we are, a sleeve. And the sleeve was in Jameson and Smith 2-ply jumper weight in this rather nice nasturtium colour. And I had just put in a green silk at the bottom. I thought that was rather nice. Later on, I added a tube. Tubes are really easy. You just knit maybe 4 or 6 stitches and just keep knitting and knitting and knitting, and it rolls automatically into a tube, and then you can just stitch it on after you've finished the sleeve. I then sat with the sleeve for an awfully long time. Then I went to a knitting and stitching show in Edinburgh. I can't remember the actual title of the show, but you know the type of thing. And I was encouraged by my daughter to take the sample along with me, and I met a lovely group of people, of designers from Rowan, and showed them this. And Martin Story, one of the designers, said, "Oh wow, that's amazing, amazing. You have to get in touch," and etc. So of course that was just thrilling. The point was I'd never actually, well I followed Alice Starmer and done circulating, but I'd never designed my own garment. So that sort of completely stalled, and I'm sure that was the right thing to do, because there was no way I was in any way ready for that. So anyway, I better show it to you. It ended up being a tunic because I just absolutely loved it, and kept going and kept going and kept going. And it's partly because I had this absolutely wonderful wool yarn, and I wanted to use as much of it as possible. The base is as a nasturtium, and I knitted it in 2 pieces, the back and the front separately. I did not knit the body in the round. And the bottom is the nasturtiums. And it was an awful lot of work, and I got really fed up of it. So it was originally going to come up with sort of nasturtium flowers, but I got fed up of it, and I thought, oh, no, I think I'll just go into Fairisle, which I love. So I just had a fantastic time knitting up the rest. The back is different to the front, and using some of Alice Starmore's traditional Fairisle, and actually some are sort of my own design. Well, then I got stuck again, because of course it was all a bit, how do you put the sleeves in, and what do you do about the top? And so I got stuck again, and it sat and it sat and it sat. As you can see, it's really quite big. It's more of a tunic than anything. And I was knitting other things, and of course having a life. But fortunately, I then fell in love with the book, and after a bit of difficulty, managed to get hold of a copy. And if you can get hold of this, it's just wonderful. I just love this book. This is Poetry and Stitches, and it's by a lovely lady called Solveig Hisdal, who I think, well, she's certainly Scandinavian. Whether she's Norwegian or Swedish, I'm not absolutely sure. She could be Norwegian. Yeah, she's Norwegian. And it was printed in, or published in, it doesn't say, oh, 2000, I think, 2000. So that's where we are. We're sort of 15 years on from Cave's book. And this lady had gone to museums and taken inspiration from traditional textiles, which I just love the idea of that. And it was a seminal book for me. Again, it was a book I pored over for hours and hours and hours. But it did tell me how to finish my garment, my tunic, and get the top actually done. So it was sort of idea of steeks, but not quite. We certainly were stitching, cutting a bit, and the top she's got this idea of finishing this rather nicely. I just love that seam there. So because I also sew, and I've sewn from when I was in my, in fact I learned at school, so when did I start learning? About machines sewing and patterns, that type of sewing, I must have been about 11, and I was taught very well at a couple of schools I went to. And I did sew my own clothes in my teens, so sewing isn't a challenge for me. And in fact, I find it helpful to think of garments from the direction of pattern pieces, of textile, of fabric, as much as of knitted garments, if you see what I mean. And so there we are. And I called it Nasturtium, and I tend to wear it with a bright pink skirt, corduroy skirt, and they can see me coming. It also keeps me very warm, which is quite important here in Apple Tree Cottage. So there we are. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you this afternoon was carrying on from last time, my Sugar Plum Cardigan, which again is my own design with help from various books. And I haven't brought the book downstairs just now, but the book that I've been using, and I used for another jumper that I made just at the end of last year, is Anne Budd's, B-U-D-D, her book of sweaters. And I don't think I would be as far on as I am without her marvellous book, which just finds down all of the arithmetic and gives you how many stitches, etc., etc. So it cuts out a huge amount of brain work for you. So the Sugar Plum, I like to name my garments nice names. Sugar Plum Cardigan, it's in a leaf design, lacy design that is again out of another book. I might bring that next time. And I've mixed Rowan Kidsilk Haze in the colour Grace, the shade Grace, which is absolutely beautiful. And I use this yarn a great deal, and I combined it with Peep, West Yorkshire Spinners Peep in the colour Piglet. And this is Luxury Baby 4-ply. It's 52% Falkland wool, which I think is very nice to know, and 48% nylon. So the feel of this, because it's not 100% wool and it's got the silk in it and the nylon, it's quite an unusual feel. It's very soft, but it's also got an almost sort of rubbery feel, an unusual feel. And I'm not sure I would exactly repeat this combination. But it's a lot softer than other 4-ply and Kidsilk that I have tried. So there you go. Always, it's such a good idea just to buy a ball of what you're going to use and knit up a sample. Quite a good size of sample. And you can see the sample here. You can see the sample size there. That's a good size of sample. And then wash it and block it, and then feel it, and you know, think, well, this is actually a fabric that I'm making. It's not so much an item of knitting, it's a fabric that I am creating. And how appropriate is this fabric for the type of garment that I want to knit, and then take it from there. So, where are we? I knitted, what did I knit for? Yes, this has been like kind of climbing Mount Everest, actually. And I had hoped to be finished, but there you go. It's been like climbing Mount Everest because of the lace design, and it just takes me time. That's all. As I say, I'm a slow knitter, no competition. And so I finished the back, which I think I showed you the beginning of that last time. There we are with the back, and the rib on this is just quite simple. It's knit 1, purl 2, and it's not very deep. Then I knit the front right. There we are, front right, which didn't take too long. And then Christmas hit, and the Christmas holidays hit, and here we are with the sleeve, which is really quite wide. And say I'm using the Bud sweater book for the actual shapes, and I love a deep cuff. So this cuff is knit 2, purl 2, and it's 2 inches for that cuff. So the cuffs will not match the bottom of the jumper, but that's of the cardigan. It's fine by me. And there we are. And I have actually begun. Did this morning. The next cuff. Put this on again. There we are. The next cuff. And here we are with the Piglet, Peep Piglet, and the Rowan Kidsilk. Now, I think I made a bit of a mistake telling you in the previous video of the needle size. Yes, I'm using 2.5 millimeter, that's American 1.5 needle for the cuff and for the rib on the base, but the main body of the garment I changed to 3.25 needles. Now, I got these sent all the way from Australia, the other side of the world. I think they're Peyton's tortoiseshell, 3.25. And again, in the last video, previous one I had made for you, I said I love the wooden. I do. But then the tortoiseshell arrived from Australia, 3.25. And I just absolutely love these, to the point where I really wouldn't be wanting to go anywhere else. Certainly with a rather heavy lace and quite an intricate design. The tortoiseshell bends slightly at the end, which the wooden would not do. Well, there I was, very happy, knitting up with my, all the way from Australia, tortoiseshell, and I popped them down, needles popped them down with the knitting on my sofa, went off to get the inevitable cup of tea or whatever, came back, sat down, and I broke one, snapped it in half. So, went back, looked. My source didn't have 3.25 anymore. They have 3, so I do have 3 now, again sent from Australia. And what did I do? I ended up knitting. I am knitting it with 1 tortoiseshell and 1 wooden, and different lengths. So as you can see, I am not an expert knitter, but we get there. We get there. So there we are. And I hope you're inspired. I hope you haven't been put off. I'm somebody who loves a challenge, loves experimenting and researching, and loves creating. I love colour, but I've also got quite potty about lace now. Knitting is incredible. It's a wonderful, I think it's a lifelong adventure. There's always something new to be learned, and I do absolutely enjoy watching other videos from around the world and getting the different angles and the different takes. But it really does seem to me that every knitter is different, and we might end up with pretty similar results, but often even the way we knit, even the way that we manipulate the needles can be quite different. And so if you haven't ever started, do have a go. Do have a go. Yeah, be inspired. If you've been around for a long time, then you're probably laughing at me muddling along. My mother always used to say, don't work in a guddle. And yes, I do work in a guddle, but I like working in a guddle. And yeah, we'll get there. So I'll see you next time, and perhaps this sugar plum will be complete and I'll actually be wearing it for you. Let's hope so. All the best, and see you soon again. Bye-bye.